Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for coming. Okay, so let's start at the start. The title today is Setting Your Compass for Reading. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about why it's important to do extensive reading and some of the reasons behind that. Later this afternoon, I'll be introducing a reading program called Reading Oceans in the same room from 2 o'clock, where we'll talk a lot more about some of the products that Compass are doing. But this is not really primarily about Compass's products, but we'll look at some of them a little bit at the end. This is mainly about how and why we do extensive reading. So let's start with the big picture of the goals of language teaching. What do we do? What's our goals? What's our main aim as a language teacher? Okay? What are we trying to do? And I'd like you to talk to a friend and find out and answer that question. What's the main goal of language teaching? The answer is not teach English, okay? Ask a friend. What's the main goal of language teaching? Something you should focus on every single lesson, every single moment. Would you like to maybe talk together, make friends? Okay, do we have some ideas, please? Anybody would like to volunteer and answer? Yes, would you like to volunteer and answer? Thank you. All those people who don't want to volunteer, put your hands up.
They go, hey, volunteer, I volunteered. You know, communication and understanding.
That's very important. I don't think that's a main goal, though. Not the main goal. I think there's something higher than that. Yeah?
Satisfy the student states that come to your class?
Yes, that's certainly, I think, right up there at the very top. Any more? No. Okay. Well, my answer is, the goal of a teacher is to make yourself unemployed.
Yeah.
To lose your job. Yeah, that's really what we're aiming for. In any form of teaching, your aim is to take the students to a place where they don't need you anymore. Right? And by that I mean that we have to make sure the students are independent learners, that they can do things by themselves, that they don't need, hopefully, a dictionary, they don't need the classes. A lot of teaching that we do, a lot of activities and the materials that we create tend to make students dependent on texts rather than independent. One of the key skills that students will need to do is to build up particularly their reading skill. And that, I think, is probably the cornerstone of a lot of things that students need to do. So let's look at some of the goals here. Ensure they can read, write, speak, and listen, of course, that's obvious. Build pragmatic, cultural, as well as linguistic knowledge. These are all good goals. Develop learning strategies, of course, we need to do. Develop independence. And that's really what I'm talking about. This ability for them to function without you. Yeah. And develop a sense of ownership of the language. This is quite key. And my experience, while it's not great and deep with the Korean population, and I certainly know a lot about the Japanese population, but from what I hear, there are many parallels where a lot of the students they're very highly motivated, or many students are very highly motivated to learn English for extrinsic reasons, for the reasons of tests, for the reasons of praise, reasons of status, a reason of being able to say I got into so-and-so school, from peer pressure, teacher pressure, and so on. But there aren't that many, as a percentage, who are there who are really learning English for intrinsic reasons, because I really love English. They're doing it for reasons that, I want a good job, I want a good salary, I want good status, I want to please my parents, yeah, or don't want to embarrass my parents, and so on. And so, developing a sense of ownership of the language, believing it's part of you, not just something that is studied and practiced. And building a confidence with a can-do attitude. That is, they feel that when they pick up a book, they feel that they can actually do the reading rather than feel, oh my God, I can't do this, I'll try and struggle through. So what do learners need to know linguistically? Well, the grammatical systems, of course, that's obvious. From vocabulary perspective, about 2,000 everyday words occur in all types of English. We might call these general service words. But importantly, and I think this is something that many teachers don't quite understand and students don't quite understand, but there's an extremely important difference between two kinds of word knowledge, two broad kinds of word knowledge. There's a lot of confusion, leads to lots of trouble. The first is a word's form-meaning relationship. That is, how the meaning of a word is tied to its pronunciation, or it's tied to its spelling. So you would say how those two are connected, the meaning of something and its pronunciation or spelling. For a lot of people, a lot of course materials, a lot of teachers, that's where word learning stops. If you look at most course books and most things, they just teach the word and don't teach much beyond how to use the word so much. Students are just expected to pick it up somehow. The question is, how do they pick up this deeper aspect of knowledge, where a word has different meaning senses, for example, or different uses? Why we would say blonde hair, but we don't say blonde car. Right? So and students need to know that. It's important for them to understand why we would say things in certain ways and not other ways, if they're going to sound even slightly native-like. They need to know the derivatives. So we don't just teach use, we've got to make sure they know useful or useless or disused or misused. Yes? These are all part of knowing a word. Whether a word's typically a spoken word or a written word is very important. A lot of materials that are published basically focus on the written word. Very little is focused on the spoken word. A lot of the language that students meet in course books is actually written language, but it's not spoken language. Students need to know if a word is rare or polite, or whether it's maybe a rude word. They need to know if the word is rare, because if it's rare, then I don't need to spend time learning it. And a lot of course books have lots of rare words which students simply don't need. We need to focus on the most important words. And they need to know what topic it is going to be found in, science, music, and so on, collocations and colligations. Now, everybody know collocation is okay? Who doesn't know collocation? Okay, all right. Okay, so collocations, colligations. All right, let's just quickly look at these. Now, you can see co here means together, of course, right? The location is place. So this is the example I gave before about blonde hair is an example of a collocation, how words go together. Yes? We say, for example, by and large, or not large and by. Yes? We salt and pepper rather than pepper and salt, typically. Yes? So collocations are the sort of the way that we put words together. Beautiful woman, not beautiful man. Yes? You can say beautiful man, but we tend not to. It's not like it's a rule, you can't, but it's just what we tend to say. Now, colligation is quite a bit different. It's a similar idea, but has the G here refers to grammar, word grammar. So this is why we say, like, depend on someone. Not just depend, but depend on. Give something to someone, not give something someone. Yes? This is what we call colligation. It's kind of like verb grammar, if you will. And colligation is one of the most undertaught elements of language. And I still see in many course books materials out there that teach a verb, but don't teach its colligation. They'll teach you, for example, give, but not give something to someone. Yes? Give something for a reason. Yes? So we need to make sure that students know how the prepositions and the verbs go together. Come on. Here we go. So why can't Korean students read, listen, speak, and write well? And I see this every time I come to Korea. When I go to Japan, I go to Thailand, and many, many places. A kind of test that I always have is I go and try and speak to some local people, particularly younger people. And I might go to a convenience store, and even if I speak the local language, I'll try and speak English. I want to see, what does an average young kid in this country know or doesn't know? This morning, I asked for a taxi from my hotel to come here. And I said, Sukmyung University. Yeah? To the guy. And he's like, eh. I said, university. You know, very as clear as I possibly can. Yeah? University. Sukmyung University. And I think it's Sukmyung-dae, is that right? So I said, Sukmyung-dae. He goes, and several times I've been to the convenience store and asked for people simple things like, excuse me, where's the orange juice? And you go, huh? And so it's quite obvious to me that there are some Korean students who can speak English, and there's an awful lot who can't. Yes? And I'd find the same thing in Taiwan, in Thailand, in Vietnam. As recently I was in Mexico, and so on and so on. So it's not unique just to Korea. Go to Japan, you find the same thing. So a lot of the language knowledge that they have, unfortunately, is abstract. In a way, it's separated, discrete, because a lot of it's taught that way. So we teach the pieces of the language. And let me just explain to you how that works. So the basic idea here is that the sort of philosophy is that you've got a word or a piece of grammar which you teach. And you can think of it like a brick in a wall. You're building a wall. The idea is we're going to build a wall of English. Okay? And so what happens is you give them a piece of language. Let's say will. And then you add another one, say going to. And then you add, say, the difference between lend and borrow. Then you add another up here, and another one, and another one, and another one. And the idea here is that as we keep adding all these discrete, abstract pieces of language, the idea is you're building bricks, you're building the wall of English. And the basic idea behind that is when you've added all these things together, you'll then have English. And the analogy sounds quite a good one, except when there's an earthquake, a typhoon, or a wind. Because then, clunk, it's going to fall down. And the reason it falls down is nothing holding it together. The cement, the glue, that allows you to make connections between this and this, and that and this, and that and this, and these things here. There's nothing really that allows you to build the connections between languages and between elements of a language. So lots and lots of teaching of the pieces, the discrete, abstract, separate pieces of language is great. But we also need to connect it in meaningful ways. And we do that through extensive reading.